All right, welcome to the very first episode of the Labour Pool. I'm delighted to say we're kicking things off with Roger Koeppe, CFO of Untapped Global, who's here to talk all things talent acquisition and share his unique journey from consulting to leading in the staffing world. Roger breaks down how technology is reshaping recruiting, from AI-generated resumes to online job platforms, and why companies need to rethink how they vet candidates. He's got some awesome insights, and actually, honestly, we had the best time chatting. It was actually hilarious, so you're really going to enjoy this. But he's got some awesome insights into how remote work has opened up the global talent pool and how AI can be a game changer for spotting talent. But to be fair, this isn't just about hiring. It's about the intersection of finance, tech, and HR, and what it all means for the future of work. So whether you're in staffing, hiring, or just love exploring big ideas, this episode is packed with fresh perspectives you really don't want to miss. Without further ado, let's just dive right in. All right, welcome to the Labour Pool, a new podcast focused on talent champions in the talent and staffing recruiting industry. I'm here today with Roger Koeppe. Roger, say hi.
Hello.
And I'm delighted to have him as our very first guest on the pod, our very first recording of the new podcast. So thanks very much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Absolute legend. We've had great chats offline, both just before this recording and in our little discovery call or a little chat about what we might even talk about. And I'm very, very excited to speak with him today. I guess, I always like to start every podcast episode, having my guests introduce themselves. So Roger, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and most importantly, how you got to where you are today?
Fantastic. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Untapped Global. We're an international staffing firm that both does 1099 consulting and W-2 type consulting work. I've been here about 18 months. Previously, I was in the consulting industry with Arthur Andersen and Deloitte & Touche, moved my way through the Enron cycle, and then into Chicago Bridge and Iron, where we managed global construction projects. And one of the big challenges we faced was getting the proper talent, not only on site, but globally, and managing all the aspects around that. I focused a lot on making sure our projects were well staffed with the proper talent, and brought me to a discovery that the talent industry had a lot of holes in it, and started doing work around resolving that internally to CB&I. When we went through the merger there with McDermott, I had had enough of the construction industry from that perspective, and decided to move on. I was recruited by several PE firms to develop some business management around staffing, and then eventually was recruited by Untapped Global to come here and be the Chief Financial Officer.
That's awesome. And I mean, obviously having, Arthur Andersen and Enron is a nice little interesting little tidbit on your resume, to say the least. Obviously, we don't have to go into that because everyone on the planet knows what happened there. And it's also back in the news. I saw yesterday that Enron is now an NFT or some meme coin or something. I don't even know. But anyway, without getting sidetracked, I do think it's interesting that you kind of mentioned that straight away the talent industry has holes. I think that's a great way of phrasing it, and obviously you're dealing with a kind of large programs for hiring, and tell me what you mean by the talent industry has holes. Do you think it still has holes, or what's your kind of take there? Why you say that?
It does have holes. One of the big things, as I've passed through the 30 years here, before you had individual talent agencies and individual staffing consultants that had a pool of individuals that they kept in their stable. And then they would work with organizations that required talent. And so you would build a rapport with a pool of staffing professionals. They would find the people, or they had a stable. As we moved forward in technology and everybody started carrying a smartphone, what we really saw was a lot of stuff got pushed down to the individual job seeker, and the influence of the staffing professional diminished, because now folks aren't dedicated or devoted to one person helping them find work. They're looking on Indeed or Monster or the more specialized firm, LinkedIn, those kind of things. So it's the move to technology. I can tell you from the hiring side has not been a great prospect for us. We miss the old days of a personalized recruiter that understood our business and kept a stable of talent around and had contacts within the industry where they could gather more talent when the requirements were higher.
Yeah,
Now we pay giant fees to Indeed and all these technology organizations to get a monstrous pool of resumes that have at best dubious qualifications on there, and it ends up being a lot of human energy on our side to filter through all that to find the talent that we need for our clients.
totally.
So the technology piece from that aspect is pushing it down to the individuals, really made the search for talent significantly harder because the recruiters would not allow, they wouldn't pitch you somebody who didn't really have those skills, right?
Yeah.
Whereas now anybody can do an AI resume build and pick all the keywords for the job they want, and it will populate everything they need in there. And then the only way you find out that they don't have these skills is a hard interview, which is obviously, very time consuming, especially on high quantity, enrollment efforts. So
It's
it's made the industry much harder.
yeah, and it like would that be more on the 1099 side or on the W2 side as well? Like,
Really, both sides. 1099 is a little more loose
yeah,
because on the W-2 side, there's typical you're hiring for more static type positions
yeah,
that are more defined. Whereas on the 1099 side, typically independent contractors they'll do all kinds of stuff and have pretty diverse backgrounds.
yeah.
So it's
It's
harder to weed out.
well, that's I mean, this was going to say. Like, I think now the way Indeed, I mean, obviously, like there are like sort of like levels or differences between say LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster, ZipRecruiter, and like all the different sort of job boards that are kind of out there. Like LinkedIn, they all suffer the same problem, which is it's it is they are sourcing mechanisms for candidates without doubt. Like if you're offering an hourly role, for example, you on Indeed, you'll like the average candidate will apply for 40 jobs on Indeed in a single sitting. And then it's like they'll just take which is the fastest to offer them the most money. And that's literally it. So the vetting kind of gap exists, I think, to your point. I think it's like, wow, we can get this absolute flood at the top. But like if you want 100 down to one person, that's 99 people you've got to go through to get to
Yes.
that one person. And I guess like this is where I think like, you know, in the talent acquisition space, in the sort of HR tech space in general, holistically, that like there probably is going to be an enormous sea change, I would imagine, in how this is done, probably with AI over the next 4 or 5 years. Because I think, from like resume ingestion, first and
Mhm.
foremost, like how is someone, if you're like, the old adage is like, oh, they spend like 3 seconds on a resume, they go boom, onto the next, boom, onto the next. Like, even if that was 100, you know what I mean? Like you're still talking like that. Like there's just no one that could like machine their way through 100 resumes like that,
Exactly.
And so the system itself, and I mean, this is why candidates online are so furious themselves. They're like the job market's broken or the job market's rigged because they're like, I'm applying to so many jobs and I can't hear back. And it's like, yeah, like look at it from the recruiter side. Like there's just a very underfunded, understaffed, misunderstood sort of department in terms of like what it takes to truly drive like and we're only talking about the sourcing and the vetting part of this. We're not even talking about the scheduling, the interviewing, the onboarding, like all the other things to get a successful candidate even to month three. It is a very, very difficult time. And I wonder, like, in your role now, like say like a new tech, like would you say that like it's just the world we live in now that these are necessary evils, LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster, whichever? Or would you like think like, oh, how could we implement a process to bring back that real relationship driven sort of like hiring?
They're great tools because um, as we advance technologically, right? These giant candidate pools are fantastic, especially for an organization like us. I mean, we will recruit a janitor
Yep.
all the way up to a CEO. So those pools and those different tool sets are fantastic for gathering this broad network of
Yep.
individuals that we can potentially solicit for work. What I've really seen is if you go back in time to the old days of internet search, like roll back, right? Remember when a zillion companies came out and said, hey, the new search engines look for keywords. Let us put this hidden bar in your web page that has all these bogus keywords in it so that you show up and you're a company that sells bricks, but we're
It was
going
a
to
great
show up
time.
when anybody searches for clay or dirt or construction. We're going to make sure your website. So, what the AI tools, so Indeed and all those guys were there doing a great job. And then the chat GPT tools come out. And now a person can literally say, hey, build me a resume for a CEO job. And whoop, it looks like a fantastic CEO resume, right? Person may have no experience
Oh,
whatsoever. It's back to those days where these people were thwarting the search engines. And as time went on, the search engine folks got smarter. It's a arms race. It
is
always
this?
is.
I'm curious about that now. So are you saying that you've seen people apply for like kind of very executive level roles that are completely unqualified in person, but on paper they look like the right candidate, like almost
Oh,
like kind of
oh,
like tripwires.
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And there's funny
Interesting.
because we did a little thing, and this was probably nasty. I shouldn't share this, but
We could always edit this if we have to.
we created 100 resumes that were
Yeah.
fake and added the word banana peel into one of the activities that it was a senior accounting role. So
Yeah.
I created banana peels for senior management, right? And we loaded them up to websites.
Yeah.
And then we did a search for candidates for senior accounting roles.
Yeah.
3%, I know that sounds small, but 3% of those resumes that came in had I did banana peels in the actual work descriptions
Yeah.
inside the work history, which so ChatGPT ran through all these resumes, read all the activities off of them, and people were using it and they didn't even proof it to see that they were putting banana peels in their resume. So
Yeah.
we were
But
suspicious and we validated with just a little bit of testing.
so okay,
So
so you validated this idea. So does that imply that all the job specs now have certain like Easter eggs in them, or is that maybe I should apply? Or is that like just for your own mental model as a talent organization, or in a way that you look for talent that it's like that's like a signal?
it is. So one of the processes we go through now is when we are posting a position, we will chat GPT a resume for it. And it's fairly consistent.
Yeah.
It's a large language model, so it's until new data comes in, it's going to be fairly consistent. And we will use that as a template and do a compare against resumes that come in
Oh,
to
clever.
thwart people who literally just chat GPT to resume. It's not at a point where it's that successful. It catches some,
Yeah.
does weed out some, but there's definitely some improvements. But like I said, it's back to an arm race. The Indeeds and those guys and the people in the recruiting industry, especially the resume, like the AI tools that are used to help folks like us find
Yep.
candidates, they'll catch up with that,
Yeah.
and they'll be able to identify in essence, the smooth resumes or the chat GPT created resumes, but folks really don't have that experience. But it's
Wait.
right now, it's improving. I will say over the last 18 months, we have seen distinct improvement, but there's still ways to go.
Interesting. And I find it fascinating that it's like you're not trying to dissuade candidates from using it.
Oh
Like
no,
this is like the way, like, every facet of sort of this kind of particular kind of bit of work, be it on the candidate side or on the recruiter side, it's like moving with AI with the AI, but it's like how do we like tune it to like meet our needs? And it sounds like you're very much like kind of, no pun intended, attuned to that need. Where does that come from? And so I guess, like when it comes to like, you know, the company itself, obviously you're recruiting for so many different kind of companies, industries, whichever. I guess on the topic of AI, I mean, like, there are obviously certain markets that are more au fait to AI than others, or are you just seeing this like blanket across the board that like candidates everywhere that are just using AI across the board now?
No, what we actually did a little analysis, and so what we would consider trade or craft positions still have very little effect. I mean, we can see that Chat GPT or those kind of tools. I just use Chat GPT as some people say
Yeah,
soft,
of
some
course.
people
Yeah.
say Coke, right? Not anything specific to Chat GPT, but we see that it's being used, and we actually appreciate the uniformity, right? Because we
Yeah.
used to get resumes of all, especially user submitted resumes, right? Especially in the crafting trades. It adds a nice level of uniformity to the resumes. And they tend, believe it or not, they tend to be edited better. So I guess
Yeah.
the folks are using it, and then they're having somebody else look at it, or they're going through it, right? Because I think I say this kind of funny, but when you hand a guy a hammer, you're going to know real quick if he knows how to use that hammer or not, right?
Yeah.
Whereas for jobs that we see that are degree required, you know, we see a lot more, uh, I'll use the word creative experience,
Yeah.
right? I don't want to defame folks, but because the reality
Eddie.
is, yeah, you can get these kind of jobs. Like you can come in as a senior accountant or a senior finance person, and you know, if you have any kind of background at all, if you're savvy, you can get yourself dialed in, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you can't really go out to a construction site and say, "Hey, take this backhoe and dig up, level this area," right?
Well,
You're going
yeah,
to get found out in about
des
5 minutes. We can't figure out
desperate
how to turn the
times.
thing on. Yeah, but office workers, especially when you're looking at, large remote positions.
Yeah.
We have unfortunately had some very interesting encounters with 100% remote positions, where folks were, unfortunately very unqualified. They made it through the interview process, the resume vetting process. They made it through the interview process, and then even survived months in the role, only to
Yeah.
find out that they literally, you know, they weren't, all the credentials were, um, fraudulent. And so it creates a great burden on us as, because like you said, we're spending way more time vetting background checks,
Yeah.
reference checks, things that we were kind of getting away from. I mean, and if you've hired people in the recent times, we've kind of gotten out of the practice of doing reference checks because
Yeah.
it's mom, it's dad, it's uncle, it's tough unless it's a very senior position, and you can recognize the names on there, on the reference profile. Reference checking has kind of lost its value, but at this point, we're having to revert back to old school reference, phoning people up, and they're not answering because they don't recognize the number, and then you call 3 or 4 times and wait, and meanwhile the candidate could be a perfect candidate, but this delays the process, right? And
Yeah.
like you said, other people are after good candidates, and so it can be tough to walk the line between properly vetting a candidate and losing the candidate altogether because they got snatched up by somebody who was, a
Yeah.
little
And I
little less concerned.
and I mean that's the existential question fundamentally is like speed to hire,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like you want to optimize for as fast as possible, but at the same time, I mean like diligence is diligence, but if not everyone's playing the same game and there are different rules, like different strokes for different folks, so to speak, that puts an enormous pressure on you as well as to compete with regards to the hiring process. Like if you keep losing out because you being more diligent, well, the natural inclination would be to be like, well, are there areas in here that we like less need to do, like reference checks, but you're like kind of need to do them as well, you know? Like I guess, going back to what you said earlier, that like technology has kind of been like a pro in the sense that those tools are super helpful, but at the same time, a con, like in this, not that they're a con, but I mean like pros and cons. So the way I said that, but a con being that like it's the efficiency gains are there, but they're also very difficult. And I hear this a lot. Like I'll tell you what, like there's a product in the HR space that's companyless. It's everyone has one, and I think it is like the funniest thing in a real bad way, which is like ATSs are like terrible. They're like like there's hundreds of them, like they're basically just database, but they're so bad at integrating into the world of software around them. And and that's not to like be mean to anybody out there, but I mean like I've never heard anyone speak positively about an ATS in my life. I've heard people talk about software in positive ways, but I've never heard in my years of being in HR recruitment SaaS, I have never heard anyone say anything positive about an ATS. More like people are like relieved. They're like, oh my God, thank God that works. And I think about this in the sense that like the reason why I bring that up is just because you triggered something in my head is like, you know, people talk about like innovation in this space, like technological innovation. And when we talk about technological innovation in sales or in marketing, it's obvious. Like the tools are there and they're like revenue driving departments. So like you can get more budget because you can make more money for this company. So like go make more money. Obviously, when it comes to talent, a lot of companies don't look at talent as a profit center or like a revenue center. And so like there's just less budget. And so if there's less budget, it just means that like there are certain companies that might be able to extract enormous value like from a wedge within that industry. And so like ATS products are kind of like that. And the reason why I'm bringing up ATS is like for me when I look at an ATS, I see an analog process digitized. I don't see it as like, whoa, these are unlocks, if that makes sense. And I'm curious, like, when it comes to tech, because, you know, we want to bring like the human element into it, and we're coming in with more and more like technology appendages to certain wedge projects like LinkedIn or to like whatever ATS a company uses. I'm curious your take, like what it will take, what you think, like sort of like future forward 4 or 5 years, like where we're gonna go with this. Like, what are you seeing, like, in terms of like how we're going to like really like bring in real efficiency into the space as opposed to like digitizing analog experiences? I don't know. That's very long-winded, I know, but I'm just curious. I'm just like riffing off something you said.
It is the perfect question because we literally deal with that right now. We have, and I won't name it, we have a very expensive ATS that we use. And we also use NetSuite as our books of record.
Yeah.
So you run into this interesting paradox where you have duplicative data between the two systems because everybody gets paid. So everybody has to get paid out of your books of record, right? But then everything comes in through the ATS. The integration, even between this very name brand ATS and a very name brand ERP system, is almost non-existent.
Yeah.
We've had to write everything internally, and thank God we have an internal development group here that has facilitated us using that. But we have literally a daily conversation about whether or not we're going to take the servers and throw them in the dumpster that the ATS resides on, or we're going to invest millions more into it. It's at a crossroads now where the problem is it's exactly like you described. It's an analog process that just got digitized, and the companies themselves, and our fault too, the users, we don't know how to use the data that we've accumulated into these systems. I mean, we've been in business 25 years here. We have literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of candidates and former consultants in there, which should be this monstrous treasure trove. But the reality of it is it might as well be, if it's a treasure, it might as well be buried 10,000 feet underground because we can't figure out how to get to it.
Yeah.
And, every year they come around, hey, we have a new version. It does this. It's 1% better than the previous version. And, it does this one thing better. Like, it still is not doing anything what we need to resolve our problem. And from our perspective, we don't even know how to resolve our problem. So we don't
Yeah.
even have a solution, because if we knew a solution, we could write a thing, we could write a interface or a new database to tie into these systems, but we're struggling adapting too. And
Yeah.
we haven't figured out how to use this tool. I always tell the folks here, I need to send our COO to these marketing conventions, how they know how to scrape all this data and turn you buy something from Walmart and you put all this information in there, and it can scrape all this data, and these people can harvest it and use it to market it to you. We need to figure out how to use that mentality back onto our own ATS and figure out how to utilize this gigantic trove of information people that we have experience with. So, I mean, these are people that we've worked with, that have billed through us before, and we're still not sure how to attack that data. And so we need, if somebody wants to build an AI tool, something that can comb through your old ATS data and figure out patterns and links and geographical consistencies and everything else that's in there, that would be something that we would pay for. Because we know there's value there. We haven't figured out how to take advantage of it yet.
Yeah.
And to really, use the term to monetize our own, 25 years worth of ATS data that's in there.
Which, like in one sense, like you're in a very strong position. Like at least you're not like HSBC Bank or any of these mega international large enterprise that are running on ancient systems. Like you could only imagine how much data that they have there
Oh,
that
yeah.
is fundamentally inaccessible to them. Like fundamentally, like as in there's no way a company those size is really going to be able to leverage its data with AI anytime soon. Like, and it could be a telco, it could be a whatever. Like
Yeah.
these, because they're just systems are so old that they're not able to kind of get to it. I think when it comes to like talent, like it's fascinating because like the key thing that I see fail in every single SaaS company really, or what they struggle with, is a lot of integrations because the documentation, even to build integrations, is just it is like permafrost that you're like trying to melt through. It
It's a
is
good description.
very, just very poetic. I, but it's like, eh, I see it because there's so many ATSs, and the ATS is the wedge. And like you said, you've got your ERP, which is your other wedge, because it's how you pay, and you've got extremely large corporations that make a lot of bank of having like leveraging their wedge position, and more power to them. Um, I wonder, to your point though, is there, and I mean, I know as much as I wonder that there are companies and there are people that are building solutions to extract your data from these sort of larger tools to like help you like with quote unquote like business intelligence, in this case talent intelligence. Because if you're sitting there with hundreds of thousands of people over 25 years, okay, maybe even millions of people that have come through your database, you've got resumes, you've got salary expectations, you've got locations, you've got like evolution of job roles over time in your own data,
Yeah.
with like in your own data. Like this is what like I always am like, you get it. So like I'm delighted, Roger, that like you're like your own data is the oil, striking oil. The fact that you've got this much is like insane. You know what I mean? Like and like this goes back to the phrase. I'm obsessed with talking about this phrase here. I'm like talent intelligence, talent intelligence. Like what I mean, every conference, like you said, you send your people to the marketing conferences. When you think about like any HR recruiting talent conference that's on in this country, the last 12 months, 18 months has been nonstop AI and talent intelligence. And what does that really mean? And I think we're definitely seeing like a secular trend in this space where marketing, sales, operations for maybe the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years have had AI kind of been slowly baked into their products,
Yep.
like, and now this sort of realization. Here's a fun fact for you. The amount of people I get on calls with that will say to me, "Oh, this is what Ellie does," and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah. How did you end up finding us as a company?" And they were like, "Oh, I went to a conference and basically I was told to look up AI recruiting and see what all the tools in the marketplace are out there." And so it's funny that like we're kind of seeing people who are not looking for like our solution per se, but to what you said earlier, you don't know what you don't know, and
No.
then they see a product like ours and like, "Oh." hello, this is something interesting. Like I get behind this, like I get that kind of surprised smile so frequently. Um, but it's fascinating. I mean, like, tell me, like, one of the last things I've seen because I know, like, like, really, can you believe we're coming up on 40 minutes? Can you believe that? Look at that. I was like, what? Because we talk a lot. This is great. What? I keep all the laughs in the episode, by the way. The one of the things is like you're also like because you kind of deal with like tell me about the dynamic of the market that you hire for. Like in particular because there's so many. It's hourly workers. It's like contracts. It's W-2s, 1099s. We've had COVID. We're out of COVID. Hopefully, something like that doesn't really ever happen again. Touch wood. But like what do you think that has done to the market that say new tech serves, and where do you see that like evolving over the next 2, 3 years?
One of the big things that we noticed from COVID, and probably from our perspective, and if an employer is really interested in a talent, sometimes, talent pool in the workplace, unfortunately, is very similar to professional sports. There's a reason why all-star teams are fun to watch, but are not very successful. You can't necessarily have a team of all A players. You need B's and C's to round out the organization. And for organizations that do seek after a talent, the process that the industry went through with modernizing and allowing for remote work and remote coordination really opened up the talent pool for companies that are seeking a talent. When I was at CB&I, we had 9 different offices in the city of Houston alone because engineers don't like commuting a long way. So they're grumpy. They'll go work
Yeah,
down the street for somebody else if they have to drive more than 30 minutes. So we had
precious.
offices all over the city of Houston and then all over the US, all over the world. And with, the new technology with, Microsoft Teams and these other tools that are out there in collaborative, the cloud networking that's really functional now, a person, especially a very talented individual contributor, can live and work anywhere. And now I'm looking for a specialist and a very talented specialist. I don't need to just research the Houston or Dallas or New York or LA market. I now can tap into all of those markets.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, it has made talent acquisition for folks that are looking for the high end, top of the pyramid talent. We're far more successful in filling those roles in a very rapid fashion because, basically there's no borders anymore.
Yeah.
For old school organizations that still want people to sit in a chair in an office or a cube in a building in a certain part of town, they're going to have a harder time getting A+ talent.
Yeah.
And it's not that people don't want to come to the office and work because people interpret that as people just don't want to come to the office anymore. There's probably 80% of the people we deal with miss, that are remote workers only,
Yeah.
miss that interaction of the humans in the office, in the workplace, and the social environment, everything else. But it's physically a guy who lives in Houston is not going to, relocate to LA
Yeah.
or Kansas City or wherever the job is. So we, in essence, the new technology, the new tools that came out of COVID allow these companies to seek the higher end talent. And especially for smaller organizations that could never recruit
Yeah.
an A grade talent. Now, they're a little more flexible. They're willing to, allow remote, 100% remote workers. They're stealing a lot of the good talent away from the larger organizations.
Yeah. No, which is, I mean, I'm so glad you said that and what a great way to like sign it off because like it's the democratization of the marketplace for
It
talent
is.
that New York and LA and San Francisco, like you were paying like engineering San Francisco, crazy salaries, super densely located together. And now people who are in Missoula, Montana or in Houston can also compete and get a job in tier 1 companies or whatever you want to call it. So it's really opened that up. And like for me, that's like like probably one of the most important insights, if like, we have had a huge change in the way that companies can recruit. And that has had a great impact on like, Missoula, Montana is probably a great example because now it's like I was reading online that it's like the blow-ins from like the COVID experience have not left, and now like the kind of local.
Oh, good.
All right, well, I was on a roll there, and my recording stopped, so we're on like part two of the recording now, which was the end of the podcast anyway. So lols to everyone. But like I guess like the point we were saying there just before, and I will edit this obviously, but you know, the democratization of access to talent is probably the great outcome of like the terrible thing that was COVID and COVID lockdowns, which is like access to talent for people like from anywhere in the country, anywhere globally. I mean, we see it like the last company I worked with, like we hired globally, like we had an ops team in the Philippines, people
Mhm.
engineering in Brazil, and like it's arbitraging the salary gaps, like, and you can do that
Yes.
now, like you can, and that talent is totally capable. Like just because they're like in Brazil or they're in like Spain or they're in the Philippines doesn't mean they can't do the job, and like companies are starting to figure that out now. I mean, I'm not sure you've come across deal.com for DWEL. Like, I mean, like that's the whole thing is like payroll for international talent, and it's like how you can set up different sort of legal structures and payment structures and taxes and all that kind of stuff for hiring people globally. Like, I think we're only going to see a bigger push into that as well, so
Oh,
like real,
absolutely.
and I think to your point as well, I think we're just like far more comfortable now in sort of these kind of quasi hybrid kind of positions now where people are like, because to your point, it's like people used to say come into the office and sit in a chair. Like that's great if companies offer that. You know what I mean? Like, and it's great, like, and fair play to companies that want to do 100% that way. They'll struggle to find talent that want to come in, like, especially in smaller markets, in the smaller labor markets. But like the market's changed and companies have to adapt to how they find their talent now, and it's like, how can you leverage technology to kind of give you that edge? I think is sort of, you know, I guess that's like kind of the overarching theme of this conversation is like, how can we like figure out technology to kind of give us an edge to kind of like just do hiring, do talent better?
Absolutely. And make the work environment better for the employees because ultimately that's, happy employees do better work. And so the more we can do to improve people's morale and their satisfaction with their job, it's perfect all the way around. The company excels, the employee excels. So it's all great tools. We just, the problem is what often happens, the technology is advancing faster than old people like me who are running
Ah, you're not old.
organizations. We're struggling to keep up with and how to integrate these tools in. We haven't figured it out yet.
But
Um,
we're getting there.
we're trying. I mean,
We're
we have no problem giving and skinning our knees and trying again. And this piece is better and tuning it up and going at it again. And it's we'll keep doing it. But it's definitely a more exciting and a much more dynamic space than it has ever been before. And as these tools mature, it's going to get even better.
Well,
So
on that note, Roger Kepi, you're an absolute legend, man. Like, loved this conversation. Thanks so much.
thank you very much, Alex. I appreciate it.